Hello, hello. Okay, I think I'm coming through loud and clear. I'm George Grant. I work with perpetrators of domestic violence twice per week. And so I thought I would put together a little video regarding that, about what I've learned, I don't know, over the past year and a half or so, working with some of these individuals. So the root of the abuser's forbidden feeling state is the fear of abandonment. And there's really two aspects that figure into this. One is shame, not guilt. So what's the difference? Guilt is the idea that we're a good person, but we've done something bad, so we're guilty about it. Shame, on the other hand, is the fundamental feeling that we're a bad person. In other words, there's nothing lovable about us. And that's the idea of shame. That's a very early feeling, a very pre-Oedipal feeling. And for the perpetrators of domestic violence, the illusion of control, to control the situation, to control the people in the situation, is the solution for the perpetrator of domestic violence's feeling that they're going to be abandoned because they are a horrible person. Okay? So, when they come into treatment and, they may at first feel that we're kind of an extension of the punitive criminal justice system that really plays into the shame, the feeling of lack of worth that they feel about themselves, and how this, kind of plays into where they are. It kind of reinforces, the kernel of this idea. Okay, so moving along, there might be several attachment styles that these individuals have. They almost never have a secure attachment. So an avoidant attachment is, somebody who doesn't talk a lot in the group, somebody who might give you yes or no replies. They have to be prodded to, really interact with the group. And that's somebody who had, a very standoffish relationship with their earliest primary caregiver. And what they're doing is they're repeating that in the group. An ambivalent attachment, this is most often what we think of when we think of borderline personality disorder. The client who might send you 200 or 300 texts in the middle of the night, and when you see them next, they might be very indignant about why you didn't answer their texts. So this is the person who had an overstimulating relationship with their primary caregiver, and they're trying to repeat that overstimulating relationship with you. This is one of the reasons why, people don't like to work with people with borderline personality disorder or bipolar or things like that. Disorganized attachment, they might alternately be avoidant or ambivalent in their attachment style, and this can be very hard to adapt to on the fly, difficult to figure out, and a very difficult sort of attachment. One of the things I found when doing intakes, where I do my groups for the perpetrators of domestic violence is that the typical progression is, well, I shouldn't say typical, but I might hear something like, oh, yeah, we met, she came home with me that night, and she never left, right? There's almost no courtship. It's hard to know how they find each other and how they find each other so quickly. It really is a very mysterious process. But this is, very, very telling, and one of those signposts that I look for when I'm doing an intake. That, yeah, this is somebody with real troubles. Some defensive strategies you might see. Denial. Well, not just a river in Egypt, but if they have the idea that underneath all this is a referendum on whether they're a bad person or not, they might defend themselves very vigorously by just denying any of this ever happened. It wasn't their fault. They didn't do it. The cops made it up. The partner made it up. The courts are out to get them. The judge doesn't like them. All kinds of things. So denial figures very large in the ways that perpetrators may defend themselves. Insincerity is saying what one believes another person wants to hear. It's a power behavior because it's meant to disarm the other person from their options of critical thinking or acting promptly on a boundary. It is possible to say something insincerely that is actually true, and also possible to say insincerely something with which one does not disagree. All lies are insincere, but not all insincere statements are lies. A mistake is a statement that, while untrue, is delivered sincerely. Just because they're sincere doesn't necessarily have a correlation to any sort of subjective or objective reality. Okay. Compartmentalization. This describes the strategy of only telling someone what they would know about or find out anyway. In this way, one person knows a lot about the compartmentalizer. This is a shame-based strategy, aren't they all, that supports a shaky self-esteem by seemingly giving others less to criticize. In other words, they'll tell you what they want you to know, but no more. It also supports power behavior because knowing something someone else does not certainly give the feeling of power, and can often give actual power over another. So they can leverage what you don't know about them. So in this way, they compartmentalize. And if you compare stories, or if two different people compare their progress notes on the same individual, you might find that there's differences, and that can be part and parcel of compartmentalization. Justification, constantly shifting focus from actions onto reasons or intentions. Well, I meant to do this. Well, she still got a broken nose. You meant to do that, but, well, it's doesn't change the outcome. Minimization. Oh, it wasn't that bad. I only broke her nose once. Don't forget that at the basis of this, the perpetrator is defending against the idea that they're essentially a horrible person. And this is why they use all these tremendously creative strategies toward that end. Gaslighting, making the other people think they're crazy. either by directly making them think they're crazy or making everybody around them think they're crazy. Gaslighting is after the movie Gaslight, 1944, with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman, if anybody wants to look that up. Fluency, well, fluency, if there's a tendency to believe and go along with things that are said without hesitation and pauses. Self-doubt is not operative, so the person can sound very fluent as they're telling their story, has the right tone and pitch and pauses, and it sounds good. They're also not worried about the accuracy or true coherence of the content. If you listen to somebody who's using fluency, and at the time, everything sounds perfectly reasonable, but then sometime later, you play it back in your head and you realize, oh, that doesn't really make any sense at all. So that's what's called fluency. Sounds very believable, they sound very authentic, but in fact, they're not. Externalization is, well, it's what analysts call going out of the room. In other words, you start talking about the criminal justice system or what their attorney is charging or how the partner or former partner is unreasonable, how they made the whole thing up. The judge doesn't like them, the court system is against them. All this stuff that has nothing to do with the relationship between whoever this person is, the group, and the facilitators. Okay? It takes things out of the room. It externalizes them. Generalization. I think most people would feel that way, don't you? Well, whether they do or not, your partner may still have a broken nose. So it's one way of defending, but it's not really helpful, and it doesn't really shed any light on the processes going on. It doesn't really lead to progressive communication within the group, and it doesn't help anybody talk. It just is one more way of covering things over instead of bringing them out into the open. Projective identification. Well, you can see two defenses in one there. There's projection, where somebody takes something about themselves that they feel bad about, and they project it onto somebody else. Identification, the recipient of the projection begins to identify with the idea that maybe they caused this bad feeling in the person. So projective identification is not really an issue unless you have a lot of trouble sitting with extremely bad feelings. You may need to be an awful therapist for a period of time until the projective identification is resolved. Changing the frame. This has to do with the therapeutic contract. What day do they come on? What time? How long do they stay? What do they do while they're in treatment? Paying on time, paying the right amount, all that stuff. That's part of the analytic or therapeutic contract. And changing the frame means that, well, it's a way of acting out. And a lot of times, oh, I forgot, I left my checkbook at home, I don't have the money, I didn't get to the cash machine, I didn't do this, didn't do that. It may need to be explored in what else is being said. Oops, let me just move myself up here. Black and white thinking. And I have that in green because it's actually Margaret Mahler's second point in terms of object constancy. And object constancy is a developmental stage where the person begins to see that people aren't just good and bad. You know, they're not like the characters in a fairy tale or in a Disney movie, but they're good and bad, right? They have good aspects and not so good aspects. So the person who quite often is a perpetrator of domestic violence sees things in terms of what we call black and white thinking, or good and bad. There's no shades of gray. It's just black and white thinking. Transactional thinking. This is also one of Margaret Mahler's 3 points. I think this is her third point, actually. That, in other words, the person might come into treatment because they're remanded by the court and they're just ticking off the days until their obligation is done. They're not really being involved with the group. They're not really sharing. They're not really listening. They're just ticking off the days. And the idea, Margaret Mahler's idea, was that somebody who has object constancy can actually be with another person for the sheer joy of being with another person. You don't need any sort of transaction to take place. Just the company of the other is sufficient. Teleological reasoning, everything happens for a reason, okay? And if it doesn't result in some action being taken, nothing really occurred from it. So just sitting around in a group and talking is not really doing anything, right? We know that it's all process work and it's all very valuable and helpful, but they don't see it as imparting any knowledge, causing any external changes. So, you know, this teleological reasoning invalidates the group process by and large, because nothing tangible results. Trouble focusing on a single person or topic, and anxiety. This is actually Margaret Mahler's first point for object constancy. They might seem, and not all will do this, but they might seem to jump around a lot. You may not know exactly who they're talking about. You may not know the situation exactly. It can be very hard to focus on what's actually transpiring, because it's hard to trace the characters through. It's hard to relate how the one incident to the other. They really do jump around a lot, and they have a hard time focusing on a single individual or even topic. So that is actually point number one that Margaret Mahler uses for her 3 criteria for object constancy. Countertransferential feelings of this therapist in the groups. There's some projective identification, but that's not uniform with everybody. I would say the most pervasive feeling is that when they first get to group, since they sort of assume that we're an extension of the criminal justice system, that we're going to be punitive with them, and it actually stalls their induction into the group for maybe 3 to 5 weeks, which does, leave about 20 weeks or so for, therapeutic process. But It is something that occurs because they assume that we're just this punitive extension of the criminal justice system, and it takes a while till that wears off, and more individual transference and countertransferential feelings emerge. Something else I use, and I think this has a lot to do with men, that they don't have a good emotional vocabulary. So what I've done, on days when I forget to do it, sometimes the people in the group remind me that I should pass out emotion wheels. And if you look toward the center, there are the sort of general emotions, the very coarse things like anger and sadness and happiness and fear and whatever. And then as you go from the hub of the wheel and work your way out, it gets ever more variegated and nuanced. And if somebody feels that they're angry and they're trying to formulate an I statement or trying to express themselves, they could just start at the center and kind of work their way toward the rim of the wheel, and in that way become more expressive, say closer to what it is they want to say, and say all those unsaid feelings, giving them voice, and moving them from the unconscious to the conscious. Okay, I'm not going to do that because this is online. I am going to team this up with, this is a video on domestic violence, and I am going to put a link to this on YouTube. This one is on Vimeo. I don't think it had subtitles though, so it was a little bit of a problem. I'll put a better version when I post this online. Okay. I hope everybody got a lot out of this. And I can't answer questions, obviously, because, well, you're not here. But I hope everybody got a lot out of it. And, if you have questions, you could actually post them under the video. And when I see that I have questions, I'll be glad to answer. Okay. Hope everybody got a lot out of this. See you soon.